All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for showing up in the afternoon here. My name is Naomi Brockwell, and I run a research and media institute called Ludlow Institute. And our mission is to give people more control over their digital lives. So we release educational content across a bunch of different platforms that is focused mainly on online privacy. So today, I want to talk about privacy accelerationism. Who has heard this term before? There's like two of you, and I know you watch my content. You're the ones who watch it. Great. So I want to talk about why I think the future of a free internet rests in the hands of this community. This is not hyperbole, and my talk today is a genuine appeal for your help. And you're going to have to hold on because I'm not going to explain privacy accelerationism until the very end. But it's like, just think of it as this really amazing build-up. So who here thinks privacy is important? There's a lot of hands. That makes me really, really happy. And it makes sense because this is a group of people who understand the value of privacy. If you're red team, your job is to stay hidden in a network so you can find vulnerabilities, right? So privacy is essential for you to do your job. If you're blue team, you'll probably be in situations where you need to ensure that a hostile entity in a network isn't tipped off that you're onto them. So, privacy is essential for you too. In both these situations, privacy is power. Privacy is leverage. So who else in a society needs privacy? Put your hand up or shout them out. Who needs privacy? Everyone. Correct. Correct answer. Who needs privacy? Anyone? Anyone else? Teachers need privacy. Children need privacy. Huh? Workers need privacy. Yeah, we got whistleblowers need privacy. Activists need privacy. Human rights workers need privacy. Lawyers need privacy. Journalists need privacy, right? Journalists, that's an interesting one. Look at this. There's an entire Wikipedia page just filled with a giant list of all the journalists and media workers who've been killed in Mexico alone for the work that they've done, for exposing government corruption and violence amongst drug cartels. People need privacy for survival. People living under oppressive regimes need privacy. So we understand that privacy is really important for a lot of people. But unfortunately, that is not the current narrative that you hear from the overwhelming majority of people. Who can guess what the most common response is that I get when I talk about some sort of privacy leak or I advocate for some sort of privacy tool? Who thinks they know what the response is? I don't have anything to hide. Absolutely correct. I have nothing to hide. This is the pervasive narrative that I hear over and over and that I know you have heard over and over. Who's heard this? Who's heard I have nothing to hide? Yeah, it's pervasive. Yet we just made a list of countless people to whom privacy is incredibly important. So let's dive into this kind of disjunct here, right? We know that privacy is important to political opponents in an autocratic regime who is, if they're being targeted by the sitting regime. We know that privacy is important for human rights workers trying to free persecuted people. It's important to a woman hiding from her ex-lover who's turned into a stalker, to an activist who's trying to communicate privately with other protesters who are trying to fight for change in society, to the person who just lives on the fringes of society, who doesn't fit into social norms, and who just wants to live their life free of harassment. Privacy is important to all of these people. Privacy matters. So we know that all of these people need privacy tools because sometimes it's a matter of life and death. And yet, when we try to protect privacy or promote privacy, promote its importance, we're met with constant resistance. They say, why should I care? Or I have nothing to hide. And sometimes this is due to ignorance. And I don't think we can blame these people because it's really hard to understand a lot of tech. We have governments and corporations who are deliberately trying to obfuscate how much information they're collecting about people. So it's really difficult for the average person to understand what's actually going on. And if we don't have proper understanding, then this naturally is going to lead to complacency. And that's what we're facing right now, total complacency in society. But whatever the reason for this pushback, We're at a time where we need more people on our side, pushing out tools, getting them into more hands so that this balance of power across societies remains in check. Yet we have this mass of people working against us, telling us that people shouldn't care. And I'll go a little further, because sometimes I think that it's not just ignorance or complacency that is the cause. We have had a cultural shift over the past decade where renouncing privacy became this form of virtue signaling and this popular form of public shaming. Has anyone else noticed this? It's gradually, slowly seeped in. Think about it. I have nothing to hide. What sort of language is that, right? When did privacy stop being about protecting our information and having the right to choose for ourselves who gets access to it? When did we start using shameful language around privacy, about having something to hide, about demanding that people should have to justify wanting to be able to have a say in who gets their information? This slowly shifted, and I'm sure a lot of us didn't actually notice it was happening. And I'm going to get real with you for a moment. And I promise this is the last real ranty part of the talk, because I do want to move on to productive solutions about this and how you guys are the key. But first, the rant, because I think that this quip, I have nothing to hide, it's made by someone who has never faced injustice. It is made by someone who is privileged enough to have never lived under oppression, by someone who has never joined in the fight against bad laws or systemic abuse, who never plans to in the future, no matter how bad laws in society might get. It's an admission that they always plan to conform to the status quo, no matter what happens tomorrow. This is the worst kind of virtue signaling. They're essentially saying that because they don't feel the need for privacy today, they're uninterested in protecting the option of privacy for those who do, or in safeguarding privacy for their children. They're happy to let it slip away because it doesn't personally affect them right now. Now, we all just recognize that privacy is a necessary tool for protection for so many vulnerable people in our society. We know that people need to have the ability to communicate privately without fear of retribution, to feel safe organizing in opposition to powerful forces, to expose corruption without putting their lives in danger, because a society without the ability to organize against a bad government or power group is a doomed one. But privacy is in danger. Governments, malicious actors, corporations, they are all actively working to undermine it. Surveillance capabilities basically double every 2 years, in line with Moore's law. AI makes data collection easier than ever by aggregating disparate data sets and drawing ever more inferences from the patterns that are revealed. Every year we see more and more legislation that wants to ban end-to-end encryption or mandate backdoors in every chat app. Is anyone following what's going on in the EU right now? And Hungary just reintroduced this chat control that basically is going to do just that, mandate backdoors. It's crazy. It's relentless. And if you're in the policy space, it's just this numbing, constant battle to stop this stuff from taking hold. Now, this narrative about privacy not being important is insidious, and it is hurting society. Developers don't feel compelled to work on privacy tools because it just doesn't seem that pressing. Or they're scared of developing privacy tools because they're told that this is just for criminals, so it seems too risky. And fewer people feel compelled into activism against bad legislation because we as a society are just not treating this threat seriously enough. So people say they have nothing to hide, but we shouldn't be tempted to dismiss the importance of privacy simply because we personally feel that we have nothing to hide. What matters is whether we have the choice of privacy if and when we need it. And we're dangerously close as a society to eliminating that choice for everyone, because we're not advancing privacy technology fast enough to keep pace with those who are trying to strip it. So I need your help. I need your help to change the future that we're currently writing. And the people in this room are uniquely qualified to protect the future of privacy. And there's a reason why so many of you care about privacy. At the start, I asked, who cares? I think everyone put your hand up. I'm not going to ask if you didn't put your hand up because I don't want you to embarrass yourself. But so many of you already care so much about this issue. Because think about that exhilarating feeling when you write a line of code that works, or the thrill of solving a complex problem that seemed insurmountable, or the satisfaction of uncovering a vulnerability and discovering the inner workings of a system. That sense of empowerment, of control over the digital realm. This is emblematic of what privacy offers us. It allows us to navigate the vast expanses of the digital world on our own terms, free from unwanted surveillance, manipulation, or coercion. So you guys already get it. And actually, history is filled with examples where hackers and security researchers have been at the forefront of technological and social change. You have disrupted the status quo. You have exposed injustices. You have empowered individuals. We just heard some great talks today about these programs with people making a huge difference in the security of billions of people in the world just by reporting these vulnerabilities. You guys are making a huge difference. You have the skills, the knowledge, and the ethos required to lead the charge in reclaiming privacy, and in doing so, reclaiming our autonomy in this digital age. Who better to address and counter these challenges than the people right here? And if you don't believe me, let's just take a little look through history. Hacktivism in the 1990s, early 2000s. The internet was this new frontier ripe with possibilities and uncharted territories. It was akin to the Wild West, a place where the rules were yet to be written. And the only limits were those of our own imagination. And now it makes sense that pioneers and visionaries and curious minds who like to break things apart and understand them would be attracted to such a world. But it also attracted those who sought to exploit this world and control it. Governments and corporations around the world began to see the internet's potential for surveillance, for data collection, for the exertion of power. And the battle lines were drawn between those who envisioned the internet as an open, free space for collaboration and creativity, and those who saw it as a new domain to assert control and profit. Who's heard of this organization? Yeah. Cult of the Dead Cow. It was one of the most influential groups during this era. This group started in the mid-80s, and it was more than just a hacker collective. It was a movement that fused technology, politics, and culture. And their mission was clear: to promote human rights, to protect the free flow of information, and to challenge the burgeoning surveillance state. Now, in 1998, they released a groundbreaking tool. Does anyone know the name of this tool? Yeah, what a hilarious name. It makes me giggle. It was intended to expose the glaring vulnerabilities in Microsoft's Windows operating system. And at the time, Microsoft was the dominant OS, but they were negligent in addressing security flaws that left millions of users at risk. Mac Orifice was a wake-up call to the industry and the public, and it forced Microsoft and other software companies to take security seriously. The CDC's activism spread the idea that security and privacy should not be afterthoughts, but foundational principles in software development, and they were instrumental in changing computer security culture. They termed the coin hacktivism, blending hacking with activism for this fight for social justice, free speech, and human rights. They proved how this kind of community can be a powerful tool for positive change. The Clipper chip. Who's heard of this? Oh, yeah. So around the same time, the US government introduced the Clipper chip initiative. It was a proposal to embed government-accessible backdoors into consumer electronics. It was marketed under the guise of national security and crime prevention, but the Clipper chip posed a significant threat to personal privacy and the integrity of secure communications. The hacker community, alongside civil liberties organizations like the Electronic Frontier Foundation and the Center for Democracy and Technology, mobilized against the Clipper chip. They wrote technical critiques, they organized public forums, they engaged policymakers in rigorous debates. Prominent cryptographers, including Whitfield Diffie, Ron Rivest, and Matt Blaze, provided detailed analyses exposing the inherent flaws in the Clipper chip's design. They demonstrated that any backdoor accessible to the government could also be exploited by malicious actors, undermining the very security that the chip purported to enhance. And they argued that mandating such backdoors would set a dangerous precedent for government overreach, and they eventually succeeded. In 1996, due to pushback and research from the community, computer security experts and enthusiasts, the government abandoned the Clipper chip initiative. Again, the power of informed, coordinated action from communities like this one have changed history. Who knows who this man is? Yes, it's Phil Zimmerman. So there are the cypherpunks, people like Phil Zimmerman, the creator of PGP, who helped shift encryption from being classified as a regulated munition to a tool that safeguards internet security and accessibility for all. Again, a giant fight that's known now as the first crypto wars, and they won. This is all really good news. It's great news for us. As a result of cultural shifts from hacker and cybersecurity communities over the decades, we've seen companies place increasing importance on security with things like responsible disclosure emerging. We've seen the emergence of bug bounty programs, but after trends talk, they could probably use some improving. You guys also have the power to change all of that too. But they at least exist now thanks to your efforts, so let's keep going. This community has had a long tradition of holding companies accountable, changing cultural perceptions, and fighting bad government action. And now we need your help on the privacy front. And even if one person in this room decides after this talk to contribute to this cause, that's a success because every little bit counts. So first, we need more people building privacy tools. Contributing to open source projects can make sure privacy tools are accessible to everyone. Projects like Tor, now in collaboration with Tails, another really awesome operating system, Graphene OS, VeraCrypt, these have all been instrumental in advancing privacy. Who here currently contributes to any open source projects? That's very few people. Who here would have the skill to? Probably a lot more. Yeah. Open source communities lack funding, they lack contributors, they lack auditors, and these projects need more visibility to get into more hands. So if you're an engineer, help them build and debug. If you're a security researcher, you can help with audits. We often assume that open source tools are being thoroughly audited, but that is often not the case. One striking example, who can think of like probably the most striking example in history? Anyone? Heartbleed. Yeah. A major security flaw in SSL, TLS, and which is one of the internet's most critical privacy tools, but it had a bug that went unnoticed for years, even though SSL was holding up much of the internet, right? Heartbleed was devastating, and shockingly, the code was actually being maintained by someone who was earning about $2,000 a year in donations, something that was the backbone of the internet, and this one maintainer, $2,000 a year. That's crazy. No one was auditing this code. He just didn't have the resources in order to make sure that a giant critical vulnerability like this was secure. So we can all contribute to things like that. We can't assume that someone else is checking the code. And any small contribution that we make to auditing and maintaining these tools truly do matter. Now, if you're a user, help give feedback on the UX and design. Understand that these tools need to be usable by non-technical people, so making them easy to understand is essential. And also, because most users aren't going to share your level of technical expertise, see where you can make sure that the default settings maximize privacy. The less room for error on the part of users, the better. And if you don't code, you can absolutely still contribute to all of this. Maybe you can help improve user manuals and translate guides into other languages to expand access globally. Clear guides can empower people that need strong privacy but don't have the technical know-how to use these tools safely on their own. Missteps can have severe consequences, even the difference between life and death for some people. So your efforts to simplify these tools can actually have life-saving implications. And if you don't think you're best suited for writing guides or coding, just spreading awareness that some of these tools exist is super important. It gets them into more hands, it gets more people using them. Now, sometimes we forget that the average person is just completely unaware that any of these tools exist. They don't know that private email exists, right? And I'm guilty of this. I make long-form tutorials about things like setting up a SAINTCON proxy server and catering to people in this technical bubble. I often forget I'm in a bubble. And then I started creating a TikTok channel, which is basically my other content, but I put on like weird costumes, do voices, turn them into sketches, and they're completely silly. It's just, yeah, I have the serious content, and then I kind of had this throwaway stuff. But it turns out that the premise behind it was the same, right? I wanted to teach people how their tech works and about better tools that they can use. And I wanted to start at the absolute beginning. Like, yes, Gmail can read your emails. And it was a total wake-up call for me, right? People were shocked at revelations like this. What? My email is not private? They had no idea, right? So this attracted a completely different audience. And honestly, most people are like this. Most people are on the I have nothing to hide bandwagon. They don't understand the importance of privacy. They don't understand that other privacy tools and alternatives exist. So I realized that we have our work cut out for us. So education is imperative. 10 years ago, we didn't have great privacy tools. And today, people can basically swap out every service they use for a more private alternative, for ones that respect them as users. But people have to know that they exist first. Research, huge area. So just like people do a ton of research into security vulnerabilities, they can also uncover hidden surveillance mechanisms in systems. Like, for example, in the mid-2010s, researchers discovered that certain smartphones were secretly sending user data to servers in China. And this data included text messages, call logs, location information. The disclosure led to public outcry, regulatory scrutiny, and pressure on manufacturers to rectify the issue. And it also raised awareness about supply chain security and the need for transparency in software components. So by bringing such issues to light, we can hold companies accountable and we can push for higher standards in protecting user privacy. So if you're publishing research, I know there are a lot of researchers here, please let me know so I can help amplify your work. We need more people to know about this stuff. Then there's financial support. I think FOSS is great because it means that tools are available for everyone, regardless of how much money they have, regardless of where in the world they are. So if you're someone who can afford to pay for these tools instead of using them for free, I think that's really important too. I think it's super important to be donating to these people who are maintaining these tools so that they can continue to be available to those who need them the most. Now, privacy isn't just for those who can afford it. We can support the builders in this community so that billions of people around the world can also reclaim their privacy. Changing culture. I think this is the final area where we can make a huge impact, starting with company culture. Change it from within. If you work for a large company, advocate for privacy by design. Embed privacy into products from the start if you can. Promote data minimization, transparency, consent. Your industry might be able to completely change industry standards. You might have that ability. Support R&D into cutting-edge privacy tools, things like zero-knowledge proofs and homomorphic encryption. These are things that allow data analysis on data without actually exposing the raw data itself. It can do compute on data without ever revealing that data. That's a really powerful privacy tool. So see if there's a way your company can contribute more to the privacy landscape there. Policy. Laws around technology are constantly passed whether we like it or not, and often lawmakers do not fully understand the technology they regulate. So having technically competent voices in this arena, shaping inevitable policy on privacy and surveillance, can also help prevent unintended consequences that are harmful. And if you don't think that's for you, support organizations like EFF. We've heard through talks all through today the kind of work that they're doing. So it's just great that they're out there advocating for good legislative change. Who here works for a top secret government program? Thought it was worth a try. So we're really close to a giant NSA data center, and I'm sure there are a lot of people in government who are here at this conference. You guys have a role in this. You have a big role. We have an infrastructure of systemic surveillance, and some people are okay with this because it's controlled by the good guys. But just hoping that the wrong person doesn't get control is not a robust safety strategy. We need accountability in order to prevent abuses of power, and you might be someone who can make sure that there's always accountability. That may be a role that you can play. And in a free and open society, we also rely on transparent discussion to ensure that those in power don't steer the country in directions that citizens disapprove of. So if you're in a position to reaffirm the value of public discourse around the kinds of weapons that governments are using in our name, you could be a real force for good. This is an important one. All right, I want to get some answers from the audience because I think making conscious choices in our own lives to choose products that are trying to protect people is super important. So what are some privacy tools people can start using today? Who uses any privacy tools? What do you use?
One of the ones that I started.
Simple X, interesting. So a chat program, people often recommend it if they're not using Signal or maybe they like Session or whatever, but these kinds of private messaging tools that are end-to-end encrypted, super interesting, right? What are some other tools? Signal, another great open source end-to-end encrypted messengers. They do an amazing job even mitigating any metadata leaks and things like GIFs and stickers. They're just really great clamping down on privacy leaks. Any other tools? Privacy Badger. All right. These are all amazing tools, right? That's Mozilla Foundation, right? Privacy. EFF. Right. So look at some of these tools that these organizations are coming out with, right? We've got, like, what kind of browser do people use? Please don't say Chrome. There's not a privacy option.
Chrome with you block.
Chrome with you. Okay, Origin totally passes. uBlock Origin, you get away with that one. Let's just eliminate that first part. Probably the most egregious privacy offender out there is Chrome. Ditch that. But uBlock Origin, amazing tool. Brave browser, amazing tool. It's also a search engine. If you guys wanted to check that out, they have a private AI. If you guys are like, oh, AI is going to collect my data and use it in the training models so that my prompts are now integrating in this complex data set and can never be removed, you might want to try out something like Brave's AI Leo. It's a very cool tool. VPNs. Who uses a VPN? Great. Malvad, yes, probably one of the best VPNs. There are a lot of scam apps out there. Just looking in the App Store, I would say over half of those apps are scam shell companies that are collecting all your data. And if you just look into the permissions that a VPN should not have, you can start to get transparency into that. But I've known some people who've reverse engineered a lot of this code. A lot of these things are collecting mouse movements, logging your keys, doing all kinds of stuff. VPNs are essential, but making sure that you're making informed choices about your VPN, even more essential. I'd say Proton's another great VPN if you wanted to try out that. So email, Proton Suites, we've got that. Other private email providers.
Fastmail.
What was that? Fastmail? That is not end-to-end encrypted as far as I know. Braxmail. Right, yeah, listen. Do some digging, find private email alternatives, but a lot of them are out there are great. I would say Tutor is one of my top ones. They have an entire Office suite that they're building out. They just launched end-to-end encrypted calendars as well. Proton also has an entire suite that has collaborative docs, Drive, encrypted calendar, email. So try out these tools. Word processor, I'm kind of shocked, like as I do research into these things, how much egregious data collection there is, and even just using something like Little Snitch can kind of help reveal all this telemetry and all this connection with external servers that's going on. It could get pretty daunting. And like things like Microsoft Word, I'm thinking, well, I'm not going to use Microsoft 365. That was banned in Germany a couple of years ago because of the privacy violations. So I'll just use the software offline on my computer. Who knows whether I'm actually offline and is any of my data being collected in a locally hosted Microsoft Word program on my computer? Anyone know the answer to that? All of it. Yeah, it downloads simultaneously a program called Aria, and Aria's job is to collect the stuff you're doing while you're using the project, and then when you reconnect to the internet, then it sends it all out. So all this stuff our machines that we're unaware of, all this data collection, and I think we need to push back. We need to stop saying that this is okay. We need to stop normalizing this pervasive data collection that's being scooped up by data brokers who are also selling to governments all over the world, and we need to reaffirm that privacy is a value. So by choosing companies that spy on us, we push companies that actually respect their users' privacy out of the market because no one uses them, and so they stop existing. And so we need to start making better choices and supporting those people who are trying to support us. Alternatively, choosing privacy-focused tools sends a market signal that this is something that we value. It encourages more companies to start to offer these tools. It inspires those around us to care. Who will still chat with their friends on Twitter DMs without end-to-end encryption? Because they did add the offer, but it's like hidden in the settings. Who still uses social media and SMS to chat with people in their life? I bet a lot of you, yeah. I think you guys can be a positive force for change just by getting those people in your immediate circle to move to more private platforms and just recognize that, people say things like, I really have to download another app, how annoying. And you look at their phone, they have like 700 apps, and one of them is like a leaf recognition device where you take photos of plants. It's like, come on, you won't download Signal, but you'll download this app by some obscure developer that takes photos of leaves. So I think that you can work on them. I think you can convince them. I think we just have to try a little harder. So finally, when people tell us that they have nothing to hide, we need to change their mind. This isn't about something to hide. The battle is about safeguarding our choice of privacy, regardless of whether we choose to use it. Privacy is about getting to decide for ourselves who gets our data. The alternative is no longer having the option of privacy, where countless entities get deep insight into everything about our lives. And the implications of this are profound. It is a fundamental shift in how power is exercised in society. When our actions and decisions are guided by algorithms and manipulated, our autonomy is compromised. Privacy becomes not just about hiding information, but about preserving the freedom to think and act independently. It's about safeguarding the very essence of what makes us human, our ability to make choices based on our own values and reasoning. Pervasive surveillance also alters the very fabric of society. The knowledge or even the suspicion that we are being watched leads to self-censorship. People become hesitant to explore ideas, to express opinions. Creativity and innovation suffer when individuals fear that their actions are being scrutinized and possibly misinterpreted. The suppression of dissenting voices and the homogenization of thought, it stifles progress and societal advancement. And of course, there are political consequences, right? Who saw this picture circulate during the Hong Kong protests? So we saw lines of people trying to pay with cash to use the subway systems, knowing that the surveillance of electronic purchases would tie them to the scene of protests. Today, since the implementation of national security law, opposition parties were disbanded, independent media outlets shut down, and activists jailed. Throughout China, pervasive surveillance makes political opposition and dissent incredibly difficult. Then, during the 2011 Arab Spring, activists relied on social media to organize protests and disseminate information. However, governments adapted quickly, using the same platforms to monitor and crack down on dissent. Activists were tracked, arrested, and in some cases, subject to torture and extrajudicial killings. Anyone read this book? It's fantastic. It's by Laurent Richard and Sandrine Rigaud. It's called Pegasus, and it dives into the details of the kinds of activists and journalists who were targeted with Pegasus because of their work. It's fascinating. It just dives into the stories that they were writing and how this tool was used to basically hunt them down for the work that they were doing by authoritarian regimes around the world. And so they give countless examples of people who are killed for trying to expose corruption and powerful entities. It just further goes to show how much people around the world need privacy. So shifting culture. Despite this reality, we currently see a trend where people are shamed for wanting privacy, and where we're told that if you're using privacy tools to hide things, you must be a criminal. Pushing back against this culture is just as important as building and proliferating privacy tools themselves. So we stand at a critical juncture. The erosion of privacy is not a distant threat. It is happening right now. And we can pave the way to a better future where everyone feels safe, not just those who feel that they have nothing to hide because they happen to be comfortable existing within the norms that society has pushed on them. If we relegate the principle of privacy to the fringes of society, we reduce the number of developers willing to work on privacy tools. We stop having educators willing to teach people about them. So instead, let's make sure that we're headed towards a future where tech and privacy can continue to coexist freely. So at the start, I said I'd talk about being a privacy accelerationist, or PRIVAC. So let's finish with that now. Being a privacy accelerationist means fighting to support privacy tools today so that they can continue to exist. It means making sure that they get into the hands of as many people as possible so that everyone can have access, regardless of their wealth or technical expertise. It means fighting against bad legislation that aims to strip us of the choice of privacy, which we are dangerously close to having happen right now. It means pushing back against the cultural shift that is turning privacy into a pariah. We need to stop normalizing pervasive surveillance and remind people that privacy is a good thing that helps maintain a balance in society and protect those who are most vulnerable. Being a privacy accelerationist means actively leaning into this fight now. We can no longer afford to wait for people to wake up to what's at stake. We need to act now and accelerate and safeguard privacy. So please join me. If you can, join me in accelerating privacy. Thank you so much. So we have time for questions in case anyone wants suggestions. If you want to share suggestions for privacy tool, or if anyone has other questions about things that I'd recommend, or
There needs to be a lot of money in data upgrade. And I feel like there are a lot of these privacy companies that start off as privacy and turn up merging it. What do you see as a way of fighting the company?
That's a huge thing. I think a big part comes down to funding. Oh, so for people who didn't hear, I'll focus on the second part, then I'll have you repeat the first part. There's a changeover of companies who start out with privacy tools, and then they realize that they can switch over to being non-private and make more money. How do we stop that? So it all comes down to funding, right? I think that we started out in this internet era expecting free tooling and kind of having this resistance against any platform that charged us. Why would I want to pay? And we didn't realize that we were paying. We were just paying with our data instead of our money. And so now starting to make people aware that they're going to be paying for this tool, they just should choose which method of payment they want is super important. People need to understand the value of their data. So there are a lot of examples of companies. I'm not gonna name and shame them, but they've started out with this privacy tooling. I don't think we should shame them, because a lot of these companies that could not support themselves by offering privacy tools, that should be a wake-up call to us. We're not using them. We're not giving them patronage. We're not supporting them. How are they expected to always exist if they can't afford to pay their developers? So I think it's up to us to start choosing products that align with our values so that more people will build these tools, more will, offer them, and that we have choices in a society, because otherwise we're just going to lose them. There's an interesting thing I want to mention about this whole money being made in the data brokerage industry, because I have kind of a hot take on AI. A lot of people see AI as this tool that is going to destroy our privacy. And it is. But tech is neutral. It's a double-edged sword. It's also going to save us. Because if you think about the data brokerage industry, it's like we've suddenly become aware as a culture, like, oh, AI, they're getting information about us. They know about us. Surveillance, they're starting to get scared. That's great. But this stuff has been going on for over a decade. Data brokers know everything about you. They have for a really long time. They've been using incredibly advanced compute to draw inferences, aggregate data sets, combine different data sets. They are already doing this. But suddenly, we have access to powerful compute ourselves. That's pretty cool. Because that means that in a world where you can no longer tell the difference between deep fakes and what's real, that's actually kind of cool for privacy. We now have incredibly advanced computational tools that we can host locally on our machines that can generate so much noise about us that we could render the entire data brokerage industry obsolete. We can poison data sets. We can create noise about ourselves and completely eliminate this business model. Their entire business model rests on them being able to sell accurate information about us so companies can target us for things. Target us for consumer choices, purchases, target us for political content to get us to think in a certain way, target us for all kinds of insidious purposes. We can actually have the power to stop that. So I'm really excited. I saw a talk by Eric Hughes at ThoughtCon a couple of years ago, and he was talking about this, that this era of AI, Like one of the cool tools people can be developing right now are things that help give people back privacy by obfuscation. You know, we had this very asymmetric balance of power for a long time. Suddenly we started to equal the playing fields and we now all have access to these tools. Now's not the time to be scared. Now's the time to lean into these advanced tools we all have in our back pockets and start to use them to our advantage and rebalance those scales. What was the first part of your sentence? Because that was it. Great. Wonderful. Fortuitous. Anyone else have a question?
Your thought.
Yep. Great question. So the traditional financial system is completely surveilled. The governments around the world have deputized banks and financial institutions for investigatory purposes, not compensating them. All of those costs then trickle down to the consumer. It ends up in higher bank fees as they have to do all this compliance regulation. But we have a completely controlled and surveilled financial system. It's really hard to have privacy in this world, right? And it's become normalized, and that's an issue. Back in 1970, when the Bank Secrecy Act was first introduced, keep in mind, at that time, the Bank Secrecy Act basically said, you're allowed all your financial privacy, but if you make a purchase over $10,000, then the bank has to keep information about that and file a report. And there was outcry about this. Everyone was like, this is unconstitutional. You have no right. We have the Fourth Amendment. It should protect me from, unwarranted invasive searches and seizures. You shouldn't have access to what I privately purchase as an innocent citizen in society. $10,000 was considered such an egregious amount that when this went to the Supreme Court actually ruled and said, well, that's such a life-changing amount. It really isn't an invasion into everyone's daily lives. Anyone know what $10,000 could buy you in 1970? A new house? Yeah. Several Corvettes? If I was buying a new house for cash today, that would seem kind of weird. I can understand that justification of that person's paying all cash for that giant, expensive, $5 million house. Let's do some further investigation. But today it's not the case. Now we're saying that every single person warrants further investigation, and it's been expanded, right? So the Nuncio Wiley Anti-Money Laundering Act basically then made it illegal for banks to even tell consumers that they were having all these SARs, suspicious activity reports, filed against them. They expanded the scope of what warranted a SAR. It's no longer $10,000. It's actually anything that the bank deems potentially suspicious. And now all the liability is on the banks, right? Because if they miss something, they're going to get in trouble from the government. So they're like, oh, Naomi came in today. She had her hand in her pocket in a wheelway. Seemed kind of suspicious. Let's just report it anyway. So we have this egregious system where just like all of these reports are being filed. It's a haystack of ridiculous amounts of data being collected. And I think that's a really dangerous situation. It's actually being used to stifle free speech in terms of consumer choices. There are lots of industries that get shut down. There are choke points throughout the industry where people have stopped payments to WikiLeaks, where people have stopped payments to medical marijuana facilities, to gun shops, to whatever. There are all kinds of sectors of society that have been targeted because of this. And I've done a lot of research into, well, is there a way to make private transactions today? Because I think it was last year they passed another law that said if you use a payment processor like a payment app like Venmo or PayPal, and at least $600 is passed through that in aggregate across all purchases in the year, then now you have to report all that financial activity to the government. That seems wrong to me. I don't understand why we don't have the ability to make a digital payment that is private anymore. $600 is nothing. That's basically eliminating all barriers, right? Let's just collect every single piece of activity if you use an electronic payment rail. And I understand the flip side. I understand that this is a tool that is used to, track people and to find bad people and hunt them down. But it is also targeting an entire innocent population. And I worry about that balance between targeted surveillance and saying, well, this tool of mass surveillance is going to make things easier. Let's do that. And the mass people, they'll all be fine. All the innocent people, I'm sure they'll be fine because we will never have anyone abusing that power ever in the future. So I think it's a scary situation. What options do we have? Cash. Great for in-person transactions. I'm so happy that Utah, there are so many cafes that accept cash everywhere I go. You pay cash. They give you a discount. Give it a try. You're going to save money, right? Just try that out. Whoops. Try that out because just keep throwing it around. Oh, no, now it's stopped working. All right. Well done, Naomi. You really aced that. Hold it here. I don't trust myself. Try paying with cash. Try leaning into that environment. I feel like a complete criminal when I use cash. It's perfectly legal, right? We have to remind ourselves that. But I'll go into the Mac store and buy a new computer, and I'll pay with cash. I'll like give them $4,000. And they kind of look at me. They're like, you are a crazy person. What person did you murder to get this money? Like, how have you been hurting society? And it's like, guys, cash used to be something everyone used. And suddenly, again, it's become this pariah. Privacy's become this pariah. I think we need to reclaim cash. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen. And things are only going to continue in the opposite direction. We're going to have CBDCs, programmable money, that is going to make it ever easier to track all purchases. Other alternative methods, if we don't have cash, gift cards, but generally they're very limited. And if you want to do like a prepaid Visa card, they generally cap out at about $200, and you got to pay $6 for every new card. A lot of them are not refillable. A lot of limitations there, just not practical. So then if you think like, is it possible to make a financial transaction? Again, completely legal financial transaction in the digital age. It's becoming impossible with the traditional financial system, but we have alternative financial systems now. And a lot of people who watch my channel, they hate crypto. And I get it because it's volatile and it was kind of this invented thing. And it's like, where's the value? Because we're so used to money being backed by something. We're used to like gold backing the US dollar. And I think we need to reframe our understanding of money. And for me, like, I think maybe this crowd will understand it a little more because we understand the value of ones and zeros, right? A lot of people are like, it doesn't exist, therefore it's not real. It's like, okay. And they're like, it doesn't exist and it has no value. It's like, because it's just ones and zeros. It's like, do you have any idea how valuable ones and zeros are today? Like ones and zeros rule our society. Software is incredibly valuable. So I think we need to reframe our thinking. And I think that despite all of the downsides of crypto, and I think there are just a ton of them, it is the only possible method today that I know of to make electronic purchases privately. And not all crypto. A lot of crypto is really, really, really terrible. A lot of it is scammy. You've got to wade through this cesspool of people trying to rip you off and sell you a meme coin that's going to like pump, and then the next day you're going to be destroyed. It's a crazy world out there. But there are projects that are privacy focused, that are created entirely to allow you to make online purchases privately. I think they're worth exploring, even if you're hesitant about the entire crypto scene. I get it. There are a lot of downsides, but start looking into it. Start exploring this world, because if you want to continue to be able to have financial privacy in this increasingly surveilled digital world, you're going to need to be able to navigate the crypto landscape. It's going to be the only option available to us. I don't know. That was a very long-winded rant. I love these rants. Someone's like, here's the thing. And I'm like, I'm passionate about that. Of course you are. You just gave a talk about it. I hope that answered your question. How am I going for time? Is there 10 minutes? Any more questions?
What? Oh.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because there are some really cool tools that are not yet quite replicated in private alternatives. So some of the tools that I use to host images and share it. So I mentioned Proton Drive earlier, which is an end-to-end encrypted drive. There's also CryptPad is another tool that I use, which end-to-end encrypts files so you can host. There's also a collaborative document suite. Keep in mind, a lot of these tools are not going to have that same facial recognition stuff built into it that is going to super easily allow you to tag this stuff. I've seen some cool products start to emerge. So Entei is a company that a lot of people love. Disclaimer, I haven't looked into it yet, but I plan to, but it's been recommended by a lot of people that I like. So I plan to look into it. And apparently they've started to do things like that. They've started to make search easier, search by place as well as by person, as well as by name, integrating a lot of these things locally instead of you sending your information in the clear to a cloud provider so they get to see all your private photos. I think getting off things like Google Photo is great. If you can do that. A lot of people use iCloud thinking that it's private, but never actually turned on the end-to-end encryption for it. So you're probably operating under a false sense of security. You actually have to go through and change a lot of settings if you want to turn on advanced data protection for iOS ecosystem and for Macs. So if you want to do that, you have to set up a recovery key. You have to understand that if you lose access to your account, you can't type in "forgot my password" and have Apple help you. This is all on you. That's what the end-to-end encrypted ecosystem is kind of like. You take on a lot more responsibility, but you also reclaim a lot more of your control over this stuff. So yeah, I would look into switching iCloud at least to end-to-end encryption. It's not a terrible option. Apple does a lot of good stuff for privacy. They still collect a lot of data, so it's not the most private option. I would opt for something like Proton Drive or Entei or something like that if you want to optimize privacy. But for normies, it can be a good middle ground if you're sharing photos with people who want the easiest system possible and something that they're familiar with. Yeah.
Just that. Right.
Image. I have heard of that one too. Yeah. Do you use that?
But I give you it does. Does.
All right, for the audience, self-hosted photo service that does a lot of things that Google Photo does, but is private. So that's really, really great. Image is the name of that one. Anyone else? Want suggestions for different tools or recommendations? All right, I think we're done then. Thank you so much for coming. And if you guys want to become privacy accelerationists, come talk to me. I also have a bunch of stickers to hand out, so come say hi. Thank you so much.